How far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland?
You'll find out.
Europe is drawing a line in the Arctic. France has now formally asked for a NATO military exercise in Greenland and says it is ready to take part. The request comes at a moment of unprecedented tension as U.S. President Donald Trump arrives in Davos, using the World Economic Forum to double down on his push to acquire Greenland, despite fierce opposition from Europe. Speaking just a day earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron issued a blunt warning. Europe, he said, will not give in to bullies and will not be intimidated.
Competition from the United States of America through trade agreements that undermine our export interests, demand maximum concessions, and openly aim to weaken and subordinate Europe, combined with an endless accumulation of new tariffs that are fundamentally unacceptable, even more so when they are used as leverage against territorial sovereignty. And here, in the epicenter of this continent, we do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality. You're welcome in Europe, and you are more than welcome to France. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have tariffs and be divided, and even to threaten now with additional tariffs. We can use the crazy thing is that we can be put in a situation to use the anti-coercion mechanism for the very first time vis-à-vis the US if they put additional tariffs. Can you imagine that? This is crazy. I do regret that. But this is a consequence of just unpredictability and useless aggressivity. It's as well a shift towards a world without rules, where international law is trampled underfoot, and where the only law that seems to matter is that of the strongest, and imperial ambitions are resurfacing. Faced with the brutalization of the world, France and Europe must defend an effective multilateralism, because it serves our interests and those of all who refuse to submit to the rule of force. And for me, the two answers are, on one side, more sovereignty and more autonomy for the Europeans. On the other side, an efficient multilateralism to deliver results through cooperation.
It was a direct rebuke of Trump's threat to impose steep tariffs on European nations unless Greenland is handed over, a move that has triggered the worst strain in transatlantic relations in decades. NATO leaders are now openly warning that Trump's Greenland strategy could fracture the alliance itself. Meanwhile, Denmark is reinforcing its presence on the ground. Additional Danish troops have landed in Greenland, joining ongoing multinational military drills under Operation Arctic Endurance. The deployment came just hours after Trump refused to rule out the use of military force to take control of the vast mineral-rich Arctic territory. Asked whether force was on the table, the U.S. president replied simply, "No comment." Behind the scenes, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has rushed into talks with Danish and Greenlandic leaders discussing joint missions and expanded Arctic security, stressing that the region is critical to collective defense. Denmark has made its position clear. Greenland is not for sale. Any attempt to seize it by force, Copenhagen warns, would spell the end of NATO as we know it.
If this issue, which is so difficult and which is so tense in relation not only to the Danish realm, but fundamentally to Europe, and for that matter also the future of NATO, that I do not think there is any need to stand and go through one by one what we have discussed. But I do see a Secretary General who is very aware of the difficult situation both the Danish realm is in, but for that matter also the challenges that exist in relation to NATO.
The most important thing about the meeting was that Trolls and I achieved some important things with regard to security in the Arctic. How many people can best provide for the Arctic in terms of security? It is important to know how to work with security in the Arctic. That is why we are now carrying out various exercises.
Of course, I see that there are these tensions at the moment. There's no doubt. Again, I'm not going to comment on that, but I can assure you the only way to deal with that is, in the end, thoughtful diplomacy. So statements from me will not add anything here. And when it comes to the Arctic, I think President Trump is right. Other leaders in NATO are right. We need to defend the Arctic. We know that these sea lanes are opening up. We know that China and Russia are increasingly active in the Arctic. There are 8 countries bordering on the Arctic. 7 are a member of NATO. That's Finland and Sweden and Norway and Denmark, Iceland, Canada and the US. And there's only 1 country bordering on the Arctic outside NATO, and that's Russia. And I would argue there is a 9th country, which is China, which is increasingly active in the Arctic region. So President Trump and other leaders are right. We have to do more there. We have to protect the Arctic against Russian and Chinese influence. And that's exactly what NATO ambassadors decided to do in September. We are working on that, making sure that collectively will we defend the Arctic region.
At the same time, the crisis is spilling into trade. Trump's tariff threats have pushed the European Union toward emergency talks, with retaliation on the table, including the activation of its so-called trade bazooka, a powerful tool that could target U.S. tech giants operating in Europe. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has underlined the stakes. The sovereignty of Denmark and Greenland, she says, must be unequivocally respected.
That geopolitical shocks can and must serve as an opportunity for Europe. And in my view, the seismic change we are going through today is an opportunity, in fact, a necessity, to build a new form of European independence. And this need is neither new nor a reaction to recent events, but the truth is also that we will only be able to capitalize on this opportunity if we recognize that this change is permanent. Of course, nostalgia is part of our human story, but nostalgia will not bring back the old order. And playing for time and hoping for things to revert soon will not fix the structural dependencies we have. So my point is, if this change is permanent, then Europe must change permanently too. It is time to seize this opportunity and build a new independent Europe. When it comes to the security of the Arctic region, Europe is fully committed. And we share the objectives of the United States in this regard. For instance, our EU member, Finland, one of the newest NATO members, is selling its first icebreakers to the United States. And this shows that we have the capability right here in the ice, so to speak. It shows that our northern NATO members have Arctic-ready forces right now. And above all, that Arctic security can only be achieved together. And this is why the proposed additional tariffs are a mistake, especially between long-standing allies. The European Union and the United States have agreed to a trade deal last July. And in politics, as in business, a deal is a deal. And when friends shake hands, it must mean something. Ladies and gentlemen, we consider the people of the United States not just our allies, but our friends. And plunging us into a downward spiral would only aid the very adversaries we are both so committed to keeping out of the strategic landscape.
And the people of Greenland have already spoken. Polls show an overwhelming majority reject joining the United States. As troops deploy, alliances strain, and tariffs loom, the Arctic has become the latest front line in a geopolitical showdown, one that could redefine NATO, Europe, and the future of the transatlantic world.